These are some whistles I made a few years ago out of some hardwood scraps I had in the shop. And I want to build on this concept today and make a 4-hole ocarina, something that you could play a tune on rather than a single note. So let's get started and build our wooden ocarina. So this is a piece of ash from the tree that I cut up in my free wood video not that long ago. And I'm going to be using this. We'll round it off and turn it down to about 1 1/8 inches. So I need to bore a 1/2 inch hole 3.5 inches deep into this dowel before I put it back on the lathe. And my drill press isn't quite big enough to handle the 6-inch spread that it takes to do that and the drill. So I've got it on blocks. I'm going to start it on the blocks, go as deep as I can, and then move it up to the table to get me to 3.5 inches. I'll then change out the drill bit and do the same thing with the 1/2 inch drill to get to the size that I need. So off camera, I marked the depth on the drill bit, put a new block in, made sure everything was as square and plumb as possible. Now I'll finish the bore with the 1/2 inch drill. Now I marked this before I took it off the lathe so I could put it back in exactly the same spot. Also, when I turned the whistles, I turned a little mandrel to put inside the hole that I had drilled. But since I'm using this machinist style deep live center, I'm going to try to turn it without it. So now I need to make the sloping cut, and I'm going to do that on the bandsaw. I didn't want to accidentally cut into the decorative part with the bandsaw, so I'm just going to finish it off with the handsaw. Before we go any further, this is a second blank that I've turned, and I'm going to do something a little different with it. And that is I'm going to use my mortising machine to put a square hole in it instead of the whistle-shaped hole. And I want to see if that affects the sound at all. So let's give that a go. So here are both ocarinas at this point. I have the original one with the sloping window, kind of looks like a whistle. And the one I just made, which is basically the same shape, but it has the square hole cut in it. So the one that looks like a whistle is finished as far as the window goes. However, this one we're going to have to slope down, and we're going to have to do that with a chisel. Now the whole thing could have been done with a chisel, drill a hole and square it up with a chisel, but if you have the tools, why not use them? So in order to do this, you're going to have something to hold the body of the ocarina in. And I threw this bench stop together out of some scrap wood, and you could do something like this or come up with something on your own, but you want to make sure that it's secure so you can work on it safely. So what I'm going to do is mark it out 1/2 inch back from this edge. So now we need to make the fipple, and that's the little plug that goes in there. It's tapered so that when you blow through it, the air is directed through the window, and it's what makes the noise. And you could probably make this out of anything. The problem is that you want to use a wood that's resistant to swelling when it gets wet, because you're going to have your mouth on there and it's going to be getting wet. So I have here a piece of cedar, and this is from a 3/4 inch cedar board, a 1 inch cedar board, and I've just cut it so I could put it on the lathe, and it'll be plenty big enough to turn the 1/2 inch fipples that we need for our ocarinas. And it smells really good. What I need to do is taper this now, and it needs to run from about, I don't know, 1/8 inch at the mouthpiece, maybe to a 1/16 of an inch on the inside. So I'm going to mark that out and then sand it smooth on the belt sander. But I'm going to leave this attached while I do that, just because it'll make it easier to do. So these are the fipples, and they will fit into the ocarinas with the side that has the smallest amount sanded off of it going in first, so that when you blow in it, it will make a noise. So we're going to need to know what key we're in, and we're going to need to know what key we're in as we go through the tuning process. So for this next part, you need to have a tuner, an electronic tuner. And I don't know how well you can see this, but I downloaded this one online for free, and there are a lot of them out there, and this will tell you what key you're in. I'll blow into this again. We'll see if I can't focus on that. So if you watch that while I blow into this, it shows us that we're in the key of C. And the one with the whistle window, it's E flat in there somewhere. So I'm going to determine where to put the holes just by where it feels comfortable, where I put my fingers. Now, I am not a musician, and most of the research that I've been able to do has been on clay ocarinas. There's very little out there on wooden ocarinas. But the way I understand it, and if someone is a musician, they can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that in numbering these holes, number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, we start with the number 1 hole. We're going to start small with a small drill, keep drilling it bigger and bigger until that hole blows a D. That's why we need the tuner. So we'll drill this hole until it blows a D. The second hole, we're calling this the second hole, has to be drilled out until it blows an E, and that's covering this hole that we've already drilled. So that this hole is covered, this hole alone will blow the note E. Then both of these left uncovered will blow F. So the third hole, which would be this one, we will drill that out until, by covering the first hole and blowing into it with these 2 holes open, that will blow the note G. So for the last hole, we can just leave them all open and tune it until it's a C, or we could cover the number 2 hole and tune it until it's a B. So that's why we have to start with small drills on each of these holes, and then drill them out slowly until we reach the tuning that we want. As I said, most of the research that I did, I could only find information on clay ocarinas. If you're making a clay ocarina and you make the hole too big, it's no problem. You fill it up full of clay and you make another hole. We don't have that option with a wooden ocarina, so we want to make sure that we go slow and get it right the first time. So that started out working pretty well until I started getting up to the bigger holes. Then they started getting really airy, and by the time I got to the last hole, the biggest hole, it wouldn't play at all. So I started playing around with this, seeing if I could fix it somehow. And this is unfixable, I think, at this point. Because I think what the problem is that this airway is too steep. There's too much wood in between where the air is coming out and the top of this airway. There's about 1/4 of an inch. And as I said, it started out good. But as the holes got bigger, it just got too airy until it wasn't making any sound at all. And one with the whistle mouth in it was even worse. So I'm discarding this design feature right off. I'm going to stick with the square opening, only maybe a little smaller opening and a less steep window for the air, slot for the air to come out through the window. So I turned 2 new bodies off camera. And the differences are, in this one, the narrow end of my turning is near the mouthpiece. So when I cut the mouthpiece in, it's going to be in the thinner walled area of this turning. The second one that I turned is just a straight piece with the mouthpiece down this end. The biggest difference is that I bored it out at 5/8 instead of 1/2 inch, and I want to see what difference that makes. So first, I'll cut the new windows in the slots by hand this time, and then we'll get back to drilling the finger holes. So I cleaned up the windows with some small files, and now I'll drill the holes like I did in the first set. See if it makes a difference. After you've done all that you can do on the tuning, then you need to find the sweet spot on the fipple and glue it in. For a finish, I'm just going to wipe these down with a light coat of mineral oil. So the new body designs worked out pretty well, and they sound pretty good when you play them. And I'll be playing them for you in a minute to show you what they sound like. Now the final size of the holes that I ended up with on these were the smallest hole, the number 1 hole, 7/64. The number 2 hole, the hole under that, 5/32. The third hole, 7/32. And the fourth hole, the biggest hole, was between 1/4 inch and 5/16. And I'm pretty confident that after I make a few more of these and experiment with the bore a little bit, I'll be able to make one fairly easily in any major key that I want. And when I do that, I'll be posting a drawing and maybe some notes on my Patreon page. If you would like to support this channel, please check out my Patreon page and become a patron. I only have one tier, and that gives you access to everything that I offer. So check that out if you'd like to help this channel grow. Now, in the video you saw me drilling out the little round ball on the top of this design of the ocarina. And that's so you can put a cord through it and wear it around your neck like a pendant ocarina. I didn't leave enough room on this one. In the future, when I make these straight ocarinas, I'll leave maybe not a ball on these, but I'll make the end a little longer so a hole can be drilled through and it can be worn around the neck. So how do these sound? So that's not too bad. That was the 1/2 inch bore. This is the 5/8 inch bore. Well, I told you I was no musician, but it sounds pretty good. If you like my videos, then please like and subscribe. And as always, I thank you for watching.